A boy slipped a note to Keanu Reeves at a café, and the moment he read it, he called 911. Keanu Reeves had always liked simple places where he could just sit and be no one. No cameras, no noise, no rush. That's why, on a rainy afternoon, he found himself inside a small café at the corner of a quiet street. The windows were fogged up from the steam of hot coffee and the cold drizzle outside. The warm scent of fresh pastries filled the air, mixing with the soft hum of people talking in low voices. It was one of those rare moments when he could almost feel invisible. Just a man lost in his thoughts, sipping coffee while watching drops race down the glass. As he sat at a corner table, wearing his old black coat and a wear-upon beanie pulled down low, Keanu felt grateful for this tiny pocket of peace. He looked around the café, his eyes drifting from table to table, catching small moments of other people's lives. An old man reading a newspaper with his glasses perched at the tip of his nose. A young woman typing something on her laptop, her brow furrowed in focus. And then there was a boy no older than 10, sitting alone at a table near the door. The boy's clothes were wet from the rain. His shoes looked too big, and he held a steaming mug with both hands, trying to warm his tiny fingers. Something about the boy made Keanu pause. There was a hollow look in his eyes, the kind that spoke of nights without sleep and days without laughter. Keanu tried not to stare, but every so often, his eyes would wander back to the boy. He wondered where his parents were. Why was he alone? Did he have enough to eat? These questions tapped at Keanu's heart like soft rain tapping at the window. He wanted to get up and ask the boy if he was okay, but he didn't want to scare him. So he stayed in his seat, trying to catch the boy's eyes, hoping he might smile or nod. Minutes passed. The cafe door chimed open and closed as people came and went, but the boy stayed. He didn't order anything else, just held his mug as if it was the only thing keeping him alive. Keanu was about to finally stand up when the boy did something unexpected. He slipped off his chair and walked toward Keanu's table, his small hands trembling slightly. Keanu's heart tightened. He sat still, letting the boy make the first move. The boy didn't speak. He just looked at Keanu with wide, pleading eyes, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. He placed it on the table, right next to Keanu's hand, and without a word, he turned and hurried back to his seat. Keanu stared at the note, his fingers frozen. He could feel his pulse quicken. Slowly, he picked up the paper and unfolded it, careful not to tear the damp edges. The words were written in shaky, childlike handwriting. Some letters were smudged with what looked like tears. It read, "Help me, please. My mom is in the car. She's not waking up. I don't know what to do. Please don't let them take me." Keanu felt his throat close up. He looked up at the boy, who was now watching him with eyes that seemed older than any child should ever be. Behind that stare was fear, but also hope, a desperate hope that someone would finally see him. Keanu didn't waste another second. He stood up so quickly that his chair scraped loudly against the floor. People turned to look, but he didn't care. He walked straight to the boy, knelt down so they were eye to eye, and spoke in a soft, steady voice. "Where's your mom?" Keanu asked. The boy's lips quivered. He pointed out the fogged window toward the far end of the parking lot. Keanu could barely see through the rain, but he made out the shape of a small old car parked by itself under a flickering streetlight. The windows were rolled up, and there was no movement inside. Keanu felt a wave of dread wash over him. He pulled out his phone with trembling hands and dialed 911. His voice, when he spoke to the dispatcher, was calm but urgent. He gave the location, explained that there was a woman unresponsive in a car, and that a child was alone and scared. Every second felt like forever. He kept one hand on the boy's shoulder, trying to steady the shivers that rattled through the thin frame. "You did the right thing," Keanu said, squeezing the boy's shoulder gently. "I'm proud of you. Help is coming, okay? You're not alone anymore." The boy lowered his head and a tear slipped down his cheek. Landing on the wooden floor, Keanu wanted to wrap him in a hug right there, but he could sense how fragile the boy's trust was. So he just stayed close, a quiet promise that he would not let go. When the paramedics arrived, red and blue lights flashing through the rain, Keanu guided them to the car. He stayed by the boy's side the entire time, holding his hand while they broke the window to reach the woman inside. She looked pale, her head resting against the steering wheel, her breath so shallow it was barely there. One of the paramedics looked back at Keanu and gave a small nod. They had gotten there just in time. As they loaded the woman onto a stretcher, the boy clung to Keanu's coat, burying his face against it. Keanu gently rubbed the boy's back, feeling a strange mix of anger and sadness swirling in his chest. He didn't know who this woman was, what had happened, or why they had been left alone in the cold. But he knew one thing: he could not walk away. He would not let this boy become just another lost story in the world. As the rain poured harder outside, Keanu looked down at the child in his arms and whispered, "You're safe now. I promise you, you're safe in that warm cafe where..." Strangers had turned back to their coffee and conversations. Something powerful had happened. Two souls, one broken by secrets too heavy to carry, the other guided by a quiet kindness, had found each other. And though Keanu didn't yet know the whole truth, he knew this was only the beginning. The note was not just a cry for help. It was a door opening into a darkness he was now determined to walk through, no matter how long it took, no matter what he had to face. The rain had turned into a cold drizzle by the time the ambulance pulled away, its siren echoing through the narrow street. Keanu stood under the flickering streetlight, one hand resting gently on the boy's shoulder. The boy was shivering, not just from the cold but from the shock that seemed to settle deep in his bones. Keanu wanted to wrap his coat around the child, but he knew it wasn't just warmth he needed, it was safety. Something that couldn't be found in a piece of fabric. The paramedics had told him the woman was alive, but they didn't know for how long. They would do everything they could at the hospital, but it would be a fight. They hadn't asked many questions about the boy. Maybe they assumed he'd be looked after. Or maybe they were too busy trying to keep his mother breathing. Either way, Keanu knew he couldn't just walk away now. "Do you want to sit in my car for a bit?" Keanu asked softly. The boy looked up, eyes wide and wary, but then he nodded. His small hand slipped into Keanu's, the grip so tight that it almost broke Keanu's heart. They walked across the lot to Keanu's old truck, the rain dripping off the boy's hair, soaking the collar of his thin jacket. Inside, the warmth from the heater wrapped around them like a blanket. The boy sat in the passenger seat, knees pulled up to his chest, staring out at the hospital lights in the distance. Keanu watched him for a moment, trying to think of the right words. He knew he had to be careful. One wrong move and this fragile trust could crack. "My name is Keanu," he said finally. "Can you tell me your name?" The boy didn't answer at first. He just pressed his forehead against the window, fogging up the glass with each shaky breath. Then, so quietly Keanu almost didn't hear, he whispered, "Liam, Liam." Keanu repeated, letting the name settle in the air. "That's a strong name. You're a brave boy, you know that." Liam didn't look at him. His eyes stayed fixed on the glass, but his fingers loosened a bit around the edge of his sleeve. Keanu could tell he was fighting back tears, trying to hold himself together like he'd had to do too many times. Before Keanu hesitated, then asked, "Can you tell me what happened? Anything you remember. It's okay if you don't want to talk. I just want to help." Liam's lips trembled. He hugged his knees tighter. Then, after a long silence, he began to speak in a voice so soft it sounded like a secret carried on the wind. "She was so tired. She said we'd just rest for a little while. She told me to stay in the cafe because it was warm. She didn't wake up. I knocked on the window. I tried to open the door, but it wouldn't move." His voice broke. A tear rolled down his cheek and landed on his knee. Keanu's chest tightened with anger. Anger at the world that could let a child go through this. But he didn't show it. He just reached out and rested his hand over Liam's, giving it the gentlest squeeze. "You did everything you could, Liam. You were so brave to ask for help." Liam turned his face toward him for the first time, his eyes red and puffy. "Are they gonna take me away now?" The question hit Keanu like a punch. He knew what Liam meant. The boy was old enough to understand how things worked, how strangers in uniforms could show up and pull you from one place to another, one family to another, until you stopped believing in the word home. Keanu didn't have the answers. Yet, he didn't know what would happen to Liam's mother or what the authorities would decide. But he knew what he could do right now. "You're not alone," Keanu said, his voice steady. "A promise made in the dark. I'm here with you. Okay, no one's taking you anywhere tonight. We'll figure this out together." For the first time, Liam's shoulders dropped just a little. His fingers relaxed. He looked down at the old leather seat, tracing the worn stitches with his small fingertip. Outside, the rain had slowed to a soft patter. The world felt quieter, like it was holding its breath for them. That Keanu knew he needed to make some calls. He pulled out his phone, dialing a friend who worked with a local shelter that helped families in crisis. As he spoke in hushed tones, explaining what had happened, he kept one eye on Liam, who had curled up under his coat, fighting sleep. The woman on the other end of the line promised she'd help arrange a safe place for the night if the hospital couldn't. But as he hung up, Keanu couldn't shake the thought that sending Liam to a shelter, even a good one, didn't feel right. Not when the boy had risked everything to reach out to him. Not when those hollow eyes had found hope in a stranger. A knock on the window pulled him from his thoughts. It was a police officer, a young man with kind eyes, peering in through the glass. Keanu cracked the window, feeling Liam stiffen beside him. "Sir, I need to ask you a few questions about what happened," the officer said. His voice was gentle but firm, the way people talk when they're trying to tread lightly round something fragile. Keanu nodded. "Of course, can we do it here? The boy's really shaken up." The officer leaned down and peered at Liam, offering a small smile. "Hey there, buddy, you okay?" Liam didn't answer. He just buried his face deeper into the coat. The officer sighed and turned back to Keanu. They talked quietly about what Liam had told him, about the note, the car, the state of the mother. The more they spoke, the more Keanu realized this was bigger than one night in a cafe. There were questions no one could answer yet. How long had Liam and his mother been living like this? Was someone looking for them? Or had the world simply forgotten them when the officer finally left? Keanu sat there for a long while, watching Liam drift into an uneasy sleep. He thought about all the people who would have ignored that note, who might have looked the other way because they didn't want to get involved. He thought about how easily Liam could have stayed invisible. Just another small story that never made it past the cafe door. But Keanu had seen him, and now there was no going back. As the clock ticked past midnight, Keanu realized the rain had stopped. The streets glistened under the streetlights, a city breathing in the quiet. He looked at Liam's sleeping face, his small hands curled up under his chin, and he made himself a promise. Whatever darkness this boy carried, he would not carry it alone. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be questions and doubt, and people who would say it was none of his business. But Keanu knew in his bones that kindness is never wasted, no matter how heavy it feels. And tonight, in the silence of a parked truck on a wet street, a boy and a man who had once been strangers now shared a bond that could not be broken. Keanu woke up before the sun rose. His eyes opened to the quiet hum of the heater in his truck and the soft breathing of Liam, curled up beside him. It was still dark outside. Streetlights cast golden halos on the wet pavement, and the city looked half asleep, like it hadn't decided yet if it wanted to wake up. For a moment, Keanu let himself sit there, watching the boy's small chest rise and fall, feeling a strange sense of peace that tangled with a deeper worry. He knew this was only the start. Calling 911 had saved Liam's mother's life, but what came next was messy and uncertain. There would be social workers, there would be papers to sign, questions to answer, people who might not believe that a boy and his mother had slipped through so many cracks. Keanu's mind wrestled with all the what-ifs. What if Liam was taken away? What if the system that was meant to protect him made him feel even more alone? Keanu gently shifted his arm, careful not to wake Liam, and reached for his phone. He scrolled through contacts until he found Marie, an old friend who worked with children's services. She was one of the few people he trusted completely. She had a way of seeing people without making them feel small, a kindness that reminded him of the warmth his mother used to carry in her voice. He sent her a text, "Need your help. It's about a boy. Please call me as soon as you're awake." Keanu set the phone down and looked back at Liam. In the dim glow of the dashboard lights, the boy looked so young, so breakable. His hand twitched in his sleep, as if he was reaching for something he couldn't find. Keanu wondered what nightmares lived behind those tired eyes, what secrets he still hadn't told. When the first rays of morning crept across the parking lot, Liam stirred. He blinked awake, eyes puffy, hair sticking up on one side. For a second, he looked terrified, like he'd forgotten where he was. Then his gaze met Keanu's, and something settled, a tiny flicker of trust, not yet strong, but no longer hidden. "Did they fix my mom?" Liam asked, his voice scratchy. Keanu gave him a small smile. "The doctors are taking care of her. She's getting help now." Liam pressed his forehead to the window again, staring at the hospital down the street. "She always says she's okay, but she's not." Keanu's heart tightened. He wanted to tell Liam that everything would be fine, but he couldn't lie. To him, kids like Liam didn't need lies. They needed someone to tell them the truth, and to stand by them when that truth hurt. "You did the right thing," Keanu said. "You were brave enough to ask for help. That's what matters." Liam didn't answer. He just stayed there, watching the world wake up outside. Cars passed by, people heading to work, lives moving on like nothing had happened. Keanu knew that for Liam, life would never be the same again. He had stepped out of the shadows the moment he slipped that note across the table. Now, there was no going back. An hour later, Keanu's phone buzzed. It was Marie. Her voice on the other end of the line was warm but serious. She asked about Liam, about the mother, about the cafe. Keanu told her everything, the note, the car, the fear in the boy's eyes. Marie listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Keanu, you did the right thing," she said gently. "But you know how this works. I can help you talk to the right people, but there will be questions. There always are." "I know." Keanu sighed. He glanced at Liam, who was still watching him with wide, listening eyes. "I just want to make sure he's safe. I don't want him to feel like he's being thrown away." Marie promised to meet them at the hospital later that day. She would bring someone from Children's Services, someone good, someone kind. Keanu ended the call feeling both relief and dread. This was real now. No more warm truck, no more shelter in the shadows. Liam's story was out there, and the world would decide what to do with it. They drove to the hospital together. Liam stayed close to Keanu's side, his small hand gripping his sleeve like he was afraid to get lost inside. The smell of antiseptic and the low murmur of nurses and doctors filled the air. Keanu led Liam down a long corridor, stopping outside a room where his mother lay sleeping, an oxygen tube under her nose. Liam stood at the door, peeking in. He didn't move, didn't cry. He just watched her, his small face pressed against the glass. "Can I go in?" Liam asked, his voice no louder than a breath. Keanu nodded. "Of course." They stepped inside together. Liam climbed onto the chair by the bed, taking his mother's cold hand in both of his. He didn't say much, just sat there, eyes locked on her pale face, waiting for her to wake up. Keanu stayed by the door, giving him space, but never leaving him alone. When Marie arrived, she brought warmth into the room. She knelt beside Liam, introduced herself, and asked him simple, gentle questions. Liam answered some, shrugged at others. Marie didn't push. She just listened. Then she turned to Keanu, her eyes serious. "They'll want to know where they've been staying, if there's family, if the mother can take care of him when she's out." Keanu nodded. "And if she can't?" Marie hesitated. "Then we'll find somewhere safe, a foster family, maybe. But it won't happen overnight. He'll need someone he knows, someone who can make him feel safe until his mother recovers." Liam turned in his chair, his eyes locking onto Keanu's. He didn't speak, but the look said everything. "Don't let them take me. Don't let me disappear again." Keanu felt the weight of that look settle deep in his chest. He knew he couldn't make promises he couldn't keep, but he could promise one thing. He would not let Liam go through this alone. Whatever it took, however messy it got, he would stand by him, because sometimes family isn't blood. Sometimes it's the hand that reaches out to pull you from the dark when you can't see the way. As the day wore on, Keanu sat by Liam's side, a quiet guardian in the corner of a hospital room. And outside, the sun rose high over the city, melting the last of the rain. Hope, he thought, is like that sun, shy, fragile, but strong enough to break through the clouds if someone believes in it. The hospital room felt too small as the hours passed. The soft beeping of the machines, the smell of antiseptic, the steady hum of voices in the hallway. It all seemed to press in around Liam and Keanu like walls, closing tighter each minute. Liam stayed close to his mother's bed, his small fingers gripping her hand. Sometimes he whispered to her, his lips barely moving. Sometimes he just watched her chest rise and fall, as if he was afraid it might stop if he looked away. Keanu sat in the corner chair, his back stiff from sleeping upright in his truck. He'd called his assistant to cancel the few things he'd planned that day. None of that mattered now. His mind was wrapped around this boy who had no one else. He thought of his own childhood, how lonely it could feel when you didn't know who you could trust. He'd grown up with shadows of grief and loss, but he'd also known the power of a stranger's kindness. Maybe that's why he couldn't look away now. Marie came and went, speaking to the doctors, making calls on her phone, checking on Liam with that same gentle patience she always carried. She told Keanu that Liam's mother was stable for now. She needed rest, medication, and time. But when she woke up, there would be questions, the kind that made your throat dry and your hands cold. Why were they living in that car? Where was their home? Was there anyone else who could help? Keanu could see the worry in Marie's eyes. She'd seen this story before, too many times. Children like Liam slipping through cracks so wide you could fall forever. Mothers who meant well but carried too much pain to stand tall. The system tried, but it was never enough. That's why Marie had stayed in the work so long, to be the small light that could guide families back from the edge. Around noon, Liam's mother woke up. Her eyes fluttered open, dazed and cloudy, when she saw Liam sitting by her bed. She let out a small, broken sound, half relief, half apology. She tried to speak, but her voice came out in a croak. Liam climbed onto the bed, careful not to disturb the wires and tubes, and pressed his cheek against her shoulder. "I'm sorry, Mama," Liam whispered. "I didn't know what else to do." She shook her head weakly, her fingers trembling, as she stroked his hair. "No, baby, you did good. You did good." Keanu stood back, watching this moment, feeling like an intruder, but also like a piece of something bigger than himself. The woman's eyes found him. For a second, confusion flickered there, and then gratitude. She didn't know who he was, not really. Just a stranger who had read a note and made a call that saved her life. But in that look, Keanu saw something that made his throat tighten. "Trust." Marie stepped forward, explaining gently what had happened. The woman, her name was Sarah, listened in silence, her fingers never leaving Liam's hair. When Marie asked her about family, Sarah just shook her head. No parents, no brothers or sisters, no one to call. They'd been staying in shelters, sometimes with friends who couldn't keep them for long. When there was no one left, they'd turn to their old car, parking behind restaurants or grocery stores where no one would see them. "We just needed one more week," Sarah said, her voice rough with shame. "I almost had enough saved for a room, but I got so tired. I'm so sorry, Liam." Liam didn't say a word. He just squeezed her hand tighter. Marie glanced at Keanu, her eyes asking the question neither of them wanted to say out loud. "What?" Now later that afternoon, a social worker named David arrived. He wore a brown jacket and tired eyes, the kind of eyes that had seen too many broken families and too many kids like Liam. He spoke kindly to Sarah, asked her if she had any addictions, any history of violence, any reason they should be worried about Liam's safety. Sarah answered every question, her voice shaking but steady. No drugs, no crime, no danger, just poverty, the kind that steals your hope one day at a time. When David turned to Liam, the boy shrank back into his mother's side. Keanu stepped closer, resting his hand on Liam's shoulder. David noticed, and his expression softened. He nodded at Keanu, as if to say, "Thank you for being here. We'll find you a safe place to stay," David said. "Maybe a shelter for now, or a foster family." Liam's eyes widened, panic flickering across his face. He looked at Keanu. his mouth opening but no words coming out. Keanu didn't wait. He cleared his throat and looked David dead in the eyes. "He can stay with me," Keanu said. The words came out before he could even think them through. They just felt right. Marie looked at him, surprised but not shocked. David blinked, scratching his head. "Are you sure? It's not that simple. You'd have to be cleared. There's paperwork, inspections, background checks. Then start them," Keanu said, his voice calm but strong. "I'm not leaving him tonight, or tomorrow, or any night until he's safe with his mom again." Liam's hand slipped into his. That tiny touch said more than any words could. David sighed, glancing at Marie. "We can do an emergency placement. It's rare, but given the situation, if Sarah agrees." They all turned to look at Sarah. Her eyes were damp with tears, her face pale and exhausted. She looked at Keanu, her lips trembling. "You do that for us?" Keanu stepped closer, his free hand brushing Liam's hair back from his forehead. "Yes, you're not alone anymore." The hospital room fell silent for a long moment, filled only by the steady beep of the heart monitor and the whisper of the rain tapping the window. And in that small, sterile space, a promise was made, one that didn't need blood or paper to make it real. Sarah nodded. Her eyes drifted shut again, a single tear slipping down her cheek. Relief and worry danced together in her expression. She knew this wasn't the end of their struggle, but maybe, just maybe, it was the start of something better. Keanu squeezed Liam's hand, feeling the boy's grip tighten back. Outside, the sun had broken through the clouds at last, casting a soft glow across the bed. And for the first time since that note was slipped across a cafe table, Liam let his head rest on Keanu's shoulder, a small sign that trust, once given, could grow stronger than any storm. Keanu never thought he'd spend his nights helping a boy brush his teeth in a guest bathroom, or folding small clothes that didn't belong to him, but that's what the next few days looked like. After Sarah agreed to the emergency placement, Marie and David rushed the paperwork, clearing every check faster than anyone thought possible. The guest room in Keanu's house, a quiet space that used to hold old books and a guitar, became Liam's room. It wasn't fancy, just a soft bed, warm blankets, and a lamp that glowed like a tiny sun when the dark felt too big. Liam didn't talk much those first nights. He drifted from room to room like a ghost, so careful not to touch anything, as if one wrong move would send him back to that car in the rain. Keanu tried to give him space. He didn't push, didn't ask too many questions. Instead, he showed Liam small things: how to feed the stray cat that sometimes waited by the back door, how to make toast with extra butter just the way he liked it, how to fall asleep with the sound of soft music playing in the background. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, Keanu would hear footsteps in the hallway. He'd open his eyes to see Liam standing there, his tiny silhouette framed by the light. He wouldn't say a word. He didn't have to. Keanu would lift the blanket, scoot over, and let Liam curl up beside him. The warmth of that small body, pressed against him, felt like a promise. You are safe. You are not alone. During the day, they went to see Sarah at the hospital. She was getting stronger, but her recovery would take time. She smiled when she saw Liam, her eyes shining with a mix of pride and guilt. She'd touch his cheek and whisper that she was sorry over and over, like maybe the words could wash away the weight they both carried. One afternoon, while Liam sat at her bedside, coloring a picture of a cat and a boy under a big sun, Sarah reached for Keanu's hand. Her grip was so gentle, yet so desperate. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Her voice was tired but clearer now, strong enough to hold questions she'd buried for too long. "You don't know us. You don't owe us anything." Keanu looked at her, at the lines on her face that made her look older than she was, at the way she clung to hope like it might slip through her fingers any second. He thought about how life had a cruel way of punishing people who were already down. He thought about the boy who had slipped him that note, the quiet plea for help that could have stayed hidden if he hadn't looked up at the right moment. "Someone helped me once," Keanu said finally. "When I had no one, I promised myself I'd never look away when someone needed a hand." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. She squeezed his hand tighter, her shoulders shaking as she whispered, "Thank you. but not everyone understood. The news got out, of course. It always did when your name was Keanu Reeves. People wanted to paint him as a hero, a saint. But behind the cameras were voices whispering doubt. Reporters camped outside his gate, asking why he'd get involved with strangers, if he was really doing this out of kindness or for some story. Online, people argued. Some called him an angel, others called him a fool. One night, after tucking Liam into bed, Keanu sat alone on the porch steps, a cup of tea growing cold in his hands. The city lights flickered in the distance, and he could hear the soft hum of traffic far away. He wondered if he was in over his head. He was just one man. What if he made things worse? What if Liam's trust in him turned out to be another broken promise? He didn't notice Liam standing behind him until a small voice broke the silence. "Are you sad?" Keanu turned. Liam stood there barefoot, wearing the oversized hoodie Keanu had given him. His hair stuck up at odd angles, and his eyes looked bigger in the porch light. "Not sad," Keanu said softly. "Just thinking." Liam stepped forward, his small hand reaching out to touch the edge of Keanu's sleeve. "Are they gonna take me away?" The question stabbed deeper than any headline ever could. Keanu set his cup down and pulled Liam into his lap, wrapping his arms around him like a shield. "I don't know what will happen yet," Keanu admitted, his words honest but gentle. "But I promise you this, I won't let you feel alone. No matter what." Liam buried his face in Keanu's chest, his thin arms wrapping around him. For a moment, all the noise, the cameras, the doubts, the fear faded into the night. There was just the boy and the man, sitting on a quiet porch under the soft glow of the moon. The next day brought more meetings. Marie came by with David, and they spoke to Sarah about the next steps. Doctors said she'd need another month before she could work again, maybe longer. She'd need a place to stay, a job, a plan. Sarah looked at the floor when they asked about family again. There was none. The only home she had now was the one her son had found by slipping a note to a stranger. As they sat together, Sarah looked at Keanu with eyes that no longer hid their fear. "Will he stay with you until I can stand on my own again?" Keanu nodded without hesitation. "As long as he needs to." Liam looked up at him, hope flickering in those tired eyes, maybe for the first time in a long time. He believed that someone wouldn't give up on him, and deep down, Keanu knew this wasn't just about saving Liam anymore. It was about reminding himself and the world that sometimes it takes one act of kindness to change a life. Sometimes it takes one note slipped across a table to show you how much you still have to give. That night, as Liam fell asleep wrapped in the softest blanket Keanu could find, a storm rolled in. Thunder rattled the windows, and rain poured down in heavy sheets. But inside that house, inside the small circle of warmth they'd built together, no one felt alone. Not anymore. Asterisk weeks passed like pages in a book no one wanted to close. Every day brought something new, a small victory, a quiet fear, a moment that stitched itself into the hearts of everyone who had stepped into Liam's world. That rainy day, Keanu learned things about Liam that he'd never seen in the café, that he could never have guessed. From one crumpled note, he learned that Liam liked drawing pictures of cats and houses with big sunflowers out front. He learned that Liam hated the dark but loved the stars. So every night they sat outside for a few minutes, staring up at the tiny lights that reminded them hope was always there, even when it was hard to see. Liam's mother, Sarah, slowly grew stronger. She moved from the hospital to a small rehabilitation center where nurses taught her how to care for herself again. Her eyes still held shadows, guilt, worry, shame, but every time Liam visited, those shadows lifted a little. He would run into her arms, showing her new drawings, telling her about the stray cat that now had a name, Lucky, because that's what Liam said he felt every time he woke up safe. Keanu never let Liam feel like a burden. He knew the boy could sense the world's harsh truths even when no one said them out loud. So he filled the spaces in between with warmth, movie nights with popcorn, stories before bed, long walks through the park where Liam chased pigeons and laughed like the child he was meant to be. People still talked, of course. Some called it charity. Some said it was just another headline for a movie star who already had enough good press. But Keanu stopped caring what people thought the moment Liam slipped his hand into his and called him my safe place one sleepy night. Then came the meeting. Sarah sat across from Marie and David in a small office painted pale yellow. Keanu was there too, holding Liam's hand under the table. Sarah looked healthier now, tired but stronger. Her hair was pulled back neatly, her voice steady even when it trembled. "I have a job lined up," she said, her fingers tapping the folder on her lap. "Just part-time for now, and a room in a women's housing program. They said they'll help me save enough to move into a real apartment. I know it won't be easy, but I'm ready." David nodded. Marie smiled, proud but cautious. There would be check-ins, follow-ups, support meetings. Nothing was guaranteed. But one thing was clear. Sarah was fighting, not just for herself, but for Liam. And Liam? He sat there, his eyes darting from his mother to Keanu, as if he was trying to figure out which world he belonged to now. After the meeting, they stepped outside into the soft spring sun. Sarah knelt in front of Liam, her eyes glistening. "Baby, you're gonna come home with me soon," she whispered. "Mama's gonna make it right. I promise." Liam nodded, but his grip on Keanu's hand didn't loosen. Sarah saw it. She looked at Keanu, her voice shaking with gratitude and something more, a quiet grief that she could not give her son the steady life he'd found in this man's house. Can you stay in his life?" she asked. "He needs you. He loves you." Keanu felt his throat close. He looked down at Liam, this boy who had once sat alone in a cafe, too scared to speak, too brave to stay silent. "I'm not going anywhere," Keanu said. "He'll always have me." Liam's shoulders relaxed. He leaned into Keanu's side, and for the first time, the weight he carried seemed lighter. The day Liam moved back in with his mother, Keanu helped pack his small bag. Liam looked around the room that had been his safe place, the books on the shelf, the cat toy Lucky batted around when he came inside, the drawing of a house with sunflowers pinned to the wall. He hugged Keanu so tight that neither of them spoke, because they both knew words would break the moment. As Sarah held her son's hand on the porch, she turned back to Keanu, her voice soft. "Thank you for seeing him when no one else did." Keanu just nodded. He saved himself. "I was just there to open the door." The car pulled away slowly. Liam pressed his palm to the window until they turned the corner. Keanu stood there long after they were gone, the wind moving through the trees, the sky stretching wide above him. He thought of how life could change in a heartbeat, how one note, one tiny act of courage, could build a bridge between two broken pieces of the world. Months later, there were still visits. Sarah and Liam would come by every week. They'd bring cookies they baked too long in the oven, drawings for the fridge, stories about school, and the new kitten Sarah found to keep Lucky company. Sometimes, when Sarah looked tired or worried, Keanu would slip her an envelope with enough money for groceries or a bill she couldn't quite pay. She never asked, and he never made her feel small for taking it. And Liam, he grew. He smiled more, slept better, laughed louder. Every time he hugged Keanu goodbye, he'd whisper, "Thank you for not looking away." And every time, Keanu's heart reminded him, kindness doesn't fix everything, but it can fix something. And sometimes, that's enough. In the end, the note that a boy slipped across a cafe table became more than just words on crumpled paper. It became a doorway to hope, to healing, to the truth that none of us are too small to save someone else. All we have to do is look up, and when we see the eyes of someone asking for help, we open the door.